Good afternoon. Everybody's awake? Just checking. Yes. Saving the best to last. It's not because it's least. It's that. I'm convincing myself of that. So, yeah. So I'm here to present to you a new initiative that I've developed within Illinois State Geological Survey with contributions from. So we'll go through the history of this, but this is not just my ideas. This is a collection of conversations, or as a result of collection of conversations with many experts around the entire value chain. Luckily, this is going to be a lot easier to deliver because of the previous conversations over the last 2 days, but more specifically, the 3 presentations that preceded this one. Earth to market and decision confidence to advance and accelerate the entirety of the value chain of critical minerals. So the arc or the trajectory of going from Earth to market, be it industry, military application or civilian application, takes different forms. And if I try to track a single commodity or a single critical minerals, that becomes a twisted pretzel that is extremely hard to deconvolute. So what I decided to do is to take a number of steps back and look at this as a national strategy framework. So this is not something that I will own or Illinois will own. This is an invitation to join me in developing this and moving it forward as a national framework to advance and accelerate the movement from Earth to market, going beyond just my role as a scientist in the Illinois State Geological Survey or an expert in one area or another. I'm inviting everybody to contribute. And the previous 3 conversations and why I chose to present in this session is an indication of that, because it goes beyond just the science. Okay. Can we do this on a keyboard or something? Okay, here we go. So just a brief introduction of what the Earth to Market is, and I have a full document. If you're interested, I would like to share that with you on how did this came about. This came about back in 25, I think. I'm new in this role, so I come from the oil and gas industry. I made God knows how many calls, and whoever took my call, I invited to join that conversation. Out of that, we try to identify challenges. What are the bottlenecks? Where are the most critical aspect that needs to move so that we can accelerate? It's very clear that the movement is very slow, and throughout all the activities, be it resource characterization, and that's us, and you saw the, forgot your name, sorry, the Earth MRI, yeah, thank you. So the Earth MRI belt, that will help accelerate that part of the value chain if it gets extended, and hopefully it will. But there are other issues and processing. And Chris, you shared that beautiful slide where you see material being shipped. And if you try to calculate the loss for every commodity every mineral that goes out, and by the time it gets back, the consumer pays for all of that. And that's such a loss that needs to be recovered. And it's extremely hard to recover. So what can we do to do that? Add to that we talked about permitting and regulations, and that takes different forms in different states. In some states, and I think in California, for example, a permit is a municipality level or maybe a county level, whereas in others it's a state level. Those different layerings also produce difficulties for these kinds of activities. So the previous talk, de-risking for financial investment is important because across the value chain, we need to do that. And that's why I chose today to focus on decision confidence rather than what activities that needs to be taken. The diamonds or the arrows between these are all decision gates. And I think every decision gates, the longer it takes to make those decisions, the longer the next stages wait. And that contributes to where we are today. Aside from the fact that, for example, the main processing is in China, and China can say, we'll do this, and they do that. This also contributes to that. So we need to be creative, not just beyond the science and engineering. We need to be creative in policy design. We need to be creative in how do we market these. We need to be creative on the return on those investments. That goes way beyond what I'm capable of even addressing. So that's the invitation of the expertise and experts in this room and beyond to come and contribute to this. And my goal, shamelessly, is hopefully by the end of this conversation is you would leave and say, how can I be part of this, or what can I contribute to this? And I'll show some example of where those contributions can come. So decision confidence, that's what brought me here today, or I want to talk about that. And I stated this earlier. When decision confidence stalls in one activity, the other activities wait, and that contributes and maybe multiply. So resource confidence, we want to make sure that we know the quality, and one of the world experts, Rick Honecker, this morning talked about that. So we want to make sure that the quality is best. We want to make sure that the quantity is there for economic value. We want to make sure that the location is suitable also for processing, or we bring those processing closer to those resources. I was in one of these, the breakout session this morning, and one of the young engineers gave us a very good question. How do we incentivize the deployment of new technologies, especially in this sector? And that's a question that has multiple sources of input to address, but it needs to be addressed. Technical confidence, processing, mining, research and development, and with that there comes another aspect that we'll talk about, which is workforce development. Policy confidence, you want to make sure that I worked in the oil and gas industry, and whenever I heard my big bosses talking about these mega projects, it's always sounded like they are de-risking these projects for the benefit of the insurance industry. If the insurance industry is happy, capital can come, and that can get the project going. Market confidence, that also touches on workforce across the board. The market needs to be there for whatever I am doing. So Earth to Market, I'm inviting everybody to come to one table so that irrespective of where you are in the value chain, you get to hear what is being worked on, and they get to listen to what you are waiting for, so that there is an off-taker for whatever activity you're undertaking. So the theme beyond this is we want to introduce AI is coming, and it's a welcome come. It's not going to necessarily just take jobs, but it will disrupt in a positive way. And today, in the morning session, for example, we talked about processing and separation. There is room for AI, hopefully, to help modeling some of these technologies, especially the bio-based technologies that can be combined also with chemical plant technologies so that we can accelerate. Do I know how to do that? No, but I think there is room for that. Yeah. Capital market, we touched also on workforce pathways. There are needs for workforce beyond just PhDs or college graduates. We also need people in the field, in the mine, that can do some of these activities in a safe way. So there is, last night in the tour of the experimental mine, John, who led the tour, said that his grandmother wasn't keen on him joining a mine, working in a mine, because his grandfather worked in a mine, and that was not a pleasant experience. So that public perception of what a mining process is also needs some help to change. So all that comes in attracting young minds and young talent to be part of this. Circular utilization, you have recycling, but you also have a circular pathway when you look at this as a system, and that's how I'm looking at this. This is an entire system. Wherever you pressure it or you release pressure, other parts of it will respond, because everything is coupled in that value chain. And I always like to use the example of AI. AI needs minerals to flourish and to build these data centers, but it can also help us improve what we do to provide those minerals and provide other talents. For example, workforce development. AI needs to be equipped, our workforce, future workforce, need to be equipped with the best ways of using AI to move forward. So why does this matter in this session specifically? We're talking about policy, we're talking about workforce. So in policy, what do we need to be true for the decisions to move forward, for these policies to come into the ground and be acted upon? Supply chain economics. What must be true for capital to commit? And I'm not saying to be promised, to commit to be deployed for those operations. Workforce. What must be true for us, educational organizations, educational institutions, to execute those programs, develop those curricula? Those are questions that need to be answered collectively so that we can move forward. Out of that, we want to identify some pathways, and I'll share in a later slide the history of what led me to produce this. Policy hubs, policy and hubs, technical hubs, regional, that can host or be designed around the regional resources so that we avoid that shipping across the globe. We ship it closer to where it is so that we can benefit and minimize that transportation cost, but also benefit from the byproducts of those processes. I talked to somebody, and I'm not sure whether they have published that or not, but there is work within Illinois that's working on optimizing transportation network using AI for critical minerals. And that's a very promising lead. Workforce pathways, and being the geological survey, we are within the University of Illinois, so that gives me access to conversations that I may otherwise not have, which includes training PhDs. We have internship programs, and this is not unique just for Illinois. This is across the board, across the nation. Capital and project finance, I think I can't say any more than what was just said a few minutes ago, but I think we can all see that there is fragmentation and there are issues that need to be coordinated, and that's where Earth to Market come into the game. I'm trying to coordinate these activities so that in one room, people get to hear, and I will repeat this, upstream and downstream need to hear the same conversation so that they know who the off-takers are and what they are expecting to prioritize what happens earlier. So a little bit about the history. I talked about that workshop with 15 or 16 state geologists. Thank you, Carrie. And thank you for all state geologists who contributed to this and the scientists and engineers that came to that workshop. That was in July 25. Late 25, I developed that document that I'll be happy to share with you. If I run out of hard copies, I'll email you that. Early in 2026, my boss, his boss's boss, myself, and one of our colleagues, we went to DC. We shopped this around. We met with a couple of staffers on the Energy and Natural Resources committees, both House and Senate. They're very excited about this. But the question was, what do you want from us? And I wasn't going to ask for a specific funding because this goes beyond one cycle or one funding cycle or one administration. This needs to be instituted as a national strategy going forward, as a coordination body or a coordination strategy or coordination philosophy that goes beyond just one cycle. We talked earlier about funding and the cyclicity of that, prioritization of different activities. In a previous life, I worked with my counterparts at the US DOE on sustainable projects and carbon removal that are no longer priorities today. In fact, they are off the shelf completely. So this hopefully will be flexible enough to allow for those variations, which are very hard to prevent. We want them not to happen, but they're going to continue, unfortunately. Next. So that brings me to AASG 2026. So the AASG is the American Association of State Geologists. I presented this earlier in a closed session for the state geologists and associates. This year in 2026, I presented this framework for the entire audience, which includes our colleagues from Department of Energy, Department of Interior. There were a sizable contingency from the USGS. That got our conversation with the USGS going. And we met also with the USGS when we went to DC. So that solidified that conversation. Out of those conversations, we're going to host a workshop in DC, Q1 of 2027. You're all welcome. Reach out to me and we'll let you know as those details develop. If I'm not available, Corey can lead you to that. Kerry can lead you to that. And so, Earth to Market, how do you contribute and what does it do? It's not me trying to own what anybody is doing. Every organization will continue to own what they do, but this will facilitate that coordination between the different parts or the different segment of the workshop. I'm getting somebody's yelling at me to move forward, so, okay. I'll move very quickly. So what can you do? What do you want to do? What do I want to hear from you? If you have a decision that needs to be coordinated, if you can contribute expertise or data into this, if you can co-develop a pathway along any of those pillars to contribute to those decisions, if you want to launch a pilot. Okay. With that, here are the details. You're all welcome. Please join me. Again, shamelessly, I'm inviting you to come and join. All right. Thank you. I'm available for the rest of the day. If you have any interest in conversation, I'm going to be on the field trip tomorrow also.
We have time for one quick question.
Has to be good.
Now or later?
She said one good question.
Did you say good or quick? Quick. Okay.
She said
She
good.
said quick,
so.
not quick. Very interesting concept here, and the idea of accelerating. Some of the challenges that I keep hearing from everybody in industry are permitting, and then the risk of lawsuits and NEPA and things like that. Do you have thoughts on how you would help smooth
Yes.
that or make it go faster?
Yeah. So my conversations next week are limited, but they are going to address those. My conversation next week is I'm going to be talking with people from the University of Illinois system who are in policy, public policy and government schools, also law schools, business development. How do we make sure, how do we minimize, we're not going to be able to prevent all that, but how do we minimize those kinds of acts as well as minimize their impact in slowing down that acceleration? Because that, in one of the slides you said 10 to 20 years, that's not going to cut it. The Secretary of Interior, I didn't hear it directly, but I heard it from people from the USGS, is very interested in compressing that timeline. And I think we have a pathway, by these discussions, we have ways to compress that. Just the same way that we did with folks may not be very enthusiastic about, for example, the deal with Mountain Pass, but that price flooring may be a good practice, not for the long run, maybe for a limited period of time, and that's where being creative in policy design come into this conversation.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Khadhrawi.
Thank you.